Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Assembly, which is going to be all about significant and famous people. And that is the topic of this week's learning projects. Before we get started with the Assembly, I just wanted to speak to you for a couple of minutes just about the situation we find ourselves in and the fact that for a large proportion of you, you are still at home where we would obviously usually be in school. And it's tough. And I know that there are many of you who might be feeling a little bit fed up, wishing that they could be back at school, seeing their friends, and for things to return to some form of normal. And I want you to know that we desperately want that too. And everybody is trying to work really hard to a point where we can introduce more children back into school when the government say it is the right time to do so. You know me, I am at my happiest when you are all in school. And seeing a few more children in school over the past couple of weeks has literally filled my heart with joy. It is bursting when I see more children in school. I really am at my happiest, and so are your teachers. We miss you all so much, and we desperately want to see you again really soon. And we're working on lots of plans to be able to do something to make that happen. But it's really important that we remain positive despite this not being an ideal situation and us wanting to be back in school and some form of normality to return. We do have to continue to stay positive. It's really, really important for our own mental well-being. We need to think positively. We need to work together in family units to make sure that we keep each other happy and upbeat and thinking nice and positively. And I know that you will be doing your bit to help your family to remain positive, to think positive thoughts, and despite things not being how we would like them, to find the positives every single day. As always, I've spent a little bit of time this week looking over some classes' work on Seesaw. And in particular, yesterday, I spent a certain amount of time looking over Blackbird's work that had been submitted onto Seesaw. And I was absolutely thrilled to bits with not just the variety of activities, but the quality of activities. In particular, some of the videos that you're producing, sharing facts, interesting facts about rainforests. Dana, a fantastic debate and really encouraging people to listen to those important messages about taking care of our environments and saving the rainforests and the animals that live within it. Fantastic to see. It really does inspire me to want to learn more and more. I think some of the facts that you guys know is absolutely incredible. And I now know, thanks to Remy, so much more about anglerfish. It's unbelievable. And again, just great to see. So do keep that coming. We love seeing it. And I will have a chance, if I've not already looked at some of your work, don't worry, I will get around to doing it. I'm taking classes at a time and I've got all the different classes to get through. So don't be disappointed. I will get to your class eventually. So, significant and famous people. Mother Teresa, Tim Peake, Neil Armstrong, Helen Sharman, Alexander Fleming, Alexander Graham Bell, Steve Jobs, Amelia Earhart, Bobby Moore, Beatrix Potter, Charles Dickens, Emmeline Pankhurst, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Mary Seacole, Florence Nightingale, Rosa Parks, Pele, the Beatles, Tina Turner, William Shakespeare, J.K. Rowling, Dr. Bernardo, Stephen Hawking, Mary Anderson. All these names, significant and famous people. But I wonder why. I wonder if some of you have recognised or heard those names before. I think everybody will have heard one or two of those names. Mary Anderson. I only spotted that this morning. when I was doing a bit of research for the assembly. Um, I'm going to throw that out as a little task to you. Who is she? Why is she significant? And I guarantee an invention that she is responsible for will impact on every single one of your lives. I'm certain about it. See if you can find out who she is and what she invented. Because, of course, significant and famous people are that for a reason. And I suppose it's important to think that not all significant and famous people are significant and famous for the right reasons. Some, of course, are significant and famous people for the wrong reasons. And that's something that you need to have a little think about. For me, we're going to focus on those people who are famous and significant for the right reasons. And that's often because they have contributed to the world in which we live in a positive way. Now, I'm trying to think about some of the people that I've mentioned in that long list a moment ago. And I'm thinking that actually they fall into particular categories, don't they? So they fall into people who have helped other people. So they've done great things for others, leaders, inventors, explorers, scientists, civil rights activists, and there are people who have worked hard for equality and peace, entertainers, sportsmen and women. There's some of the categories that you might want to explore as part of significant and famous people. And I just want you to think for a moment, when I say the word significant and famous people, who springs to mind? For you, it might be a sportsman or a sportswoman. It might be a musician. It might be an artist. It might be a leader or an inventor. Just take a moment. Perhaps if you sat with families or brothers and sisters, you can have a discussion with them about perhaps some of those people who spring to mind. I mentioned Amelia Earhart, and I know a little bit about her because I know our infants were studying her before we went into lockdown. And I know that Dougie had shared with me lots of his work about Amelia Earhart. And I used those facts recently in a quiz when I was asked about her and her flight across the Atlantic. So you might want to use some of the information you already know about a significant or famous person to lead some of the research and work that you're going to be doing this week. Now, I mentioned Florence Nightingale, and would you believe it? I've got a song for you about Florence Nightingale. Of course I have. So you might want to play it twice because you might not have heard it before. Play it once and listen to it. Play it again and sing along. Here it is.
She answered the call of the soldiers fighting in Crimea. She answered the call from heaven to go and have no fear. And for her great vacation, we honour her today. She followed the call for the nation, her lamp lights up our way. Florence Nightingale, sing aloud her name. Florence Nightingale, sing it out again. Florence Nightingale, sing aloud her name. She followed the call for the nation, her lamp lights up our way.
For many of you, you may be aware from watching Newsround or reading First News or general family discussions, you may be aware that in the news over the past week and a bit, there has been a lot of talk about racism and about countries not doing enough to promote equality, and lots of controversy over our history. And one of the things as young people you will begin to realise is as time has passed and as we look back into history, our history is not full of all good things. Our history as a country and across the world is tarred with poor choices and beliefs in things that have changed over time. And when we look back, we are not always proud of everything that our country has stood for or of things that people have done. It fits very well with this topic, I feel, because certainly for those of you who are in the juniors and some that are in the infants, you might want to focus some of your energy and time into looking at significant and famous people who have been civil rights activists and who have fought for equality amongst people. And I think that would be really interesting. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, significant people who have fought for the rights of people, especially those people who are black or ethnic minorities. I think it's also really important that we take what is happening globally and also nationally and reflect on our own local community and also our school, because it does impact us. Equality is so important, and we actually had a series of assemblies over certainly this year in particular that have focused on racism. They've focused on respect, tolerance of differences, and being proud of who we are and recognizing that we are similar in many ways, but we are also different in many ways. And that is what makes us us. And we really need to appreciate and respect each other. And I'm very, very keen to continue to enforce this message. And guess what? I've got my favourite song that does just this. It's Good to Be Me.
It's good to be me. It's good to know you. It's great to be different but together. There's no need to be in anyone's shoes. I'm happy to be the me I am. It's good to be me. It's good to know you. It's great to be different but together. There's no need to be in anyone's shoes. I'm happy to be the me I am. But if I try to compare myself with you and all the things you do, I'll never see all the qualities that make me the me I am. But if I try to compare myself with you and all the things you do, I'll never see all the qualities that make me the me I am.
Hopefully you will have had a little bit of time in between the assembly and the songs to have a bit of a think about people who your family have discussed as significant and famous people. And I hope you're now really eager to get started on a bit of research and thinking about the activities that you can do for this week around that theme. I think it's a fantastic theme, and I think it's great to be able to focus on something that we choose, because this is a really broad topic title, and you can go down whichever pathway you prefer, whether you want to focus on a significant and famous sports person, whether you want to focus on a scientist or an inventor. You can follow your passions, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. Now, I am excited to see where this is going to take you and what you're going to produce as a result of this. I'm going to be particularly interested from pupils who are able to really blend this topic title of famous and significant people with what is happening in the news around us on racism, and actually looking at significant civil rights activists who have fought for equality. And I know that there are some of you out there who are really going to be able to take this far and do lots of positive work with it. I'm excited to see what you can produce. When I was mentioning significant and famous people right at the start of the assembly, I mentioned some astronauts. So we talked about Tim Peake, Neil Armstrong, and Helen Sharman. And I'm really pleased to be able to share with you an interview with Helen Sharman about her space exploration. So I hope you enjoy this short clip.
The first time I ever felt like an astronaut wasn't really until the day of the launch. Although I'd been training for many months before then, you know, if I'd not done very well or if I'd even become ill, then my backup would have flown into space instead of me. So I remember putting on my spacesuit on that day of the launch and checking that it would hold the oxygen inside if we somehow leaked air from the spacecraft. And then, only then, I really knew I was going to space. Now, my mission had been arranged specially to put the first person from the United Kingdom into space. I'd never thought it was going to be possible for me to go into space. You know, when I grew up, I came from a very normal family. I went to a very normal school. Nobody I knew had ever been into space. Nobody from the country had been into space. There was just no way was that going to be possible for me. So I didn't even think about it until one day I was driving my car home from work and I heard on my car radio of a wonderful new opportunity, something that had never been around before for people like me. And there was a job of being an astronaut. Now, I never thought I'd get chosen. I always assumed somebody else would get the job. And in fact, I almost didn't apply because of that. You know, what was the point if somebody else was going to get the job? Why would they choose me anyway? But I thought that if I didn't at least have a go, if I didn't try it, there was no chance. It was worth a go. So I applied for the job. And of course, there was lots of training when I eventually had got that job, 18 months of training altogether, going through all the things we needed to do for the space mission. After months of training then, it was the launch day. So I put on my spacesuit and with my crew we made our way out to the rocket, up a few steps and then a lift took us right to the top. And we nestled into our spacecraft, into our seats. In fact, I'll show you what it's like actually inside the spacecraft. The seats aren't so much sitting up, but they're more kind of lying back like this with your knees bent up a bit because that's the easiest way to take the G-forces. We settled into our seats, strapped in. There were three of us quite close to each other, wearing our spacesuits were quite bulky and our elbows overlapped a bit, so we're almost touching. We stayed like this for about 2.5 hours before the launch, going through all the checks. And then, finally we were ready. There was a clock display countdown and we could see that 10, 9, 8. You can count with me if you like. Everything's ready, so all we have to do is wait. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Rocket engines fire, the gantry pulls back, and we're off into space. Now it's lumpy and bumpy because there are different rocket stages. As one stage is jettisoned, the next stage kicks in. We had about 3G during the launch, so I felt 3 times as heavy as I do normally on Earth. And the whole launch, it didn't last very long. The whole thing was over in just under 9 minutes. And then when the final rocket stage was jettisoned, immediately I started to feel weightless, but I was still strapped into my seat and had to remain strapped in for another 2 or so hours after that, checking that we weren't leaking any air out. Until then I could unstrap from my seat and just float out. And it was the most natural, relaxing feeling. I loved just floating around and feeling weightless. I'm going to go back to where I was sitting before, because actually when we're just floating like that, I mean, it's just the most weird feeling because you know that gravity is still there. Gravity hasn't gone. And if gravity had disappeared or somehow I'd escaped gravity, then I would have just carried on floating off into space forever. I mean, gravity was keeping me inside the spacecraft, and me and the spacecraft actually pulled in towards the centre of the Earth, and we were falling towards the centre of the Earth all the time. But the rocket had made us travel along really fast, of course. I mean, that's the idea of rockets, and we were moving along at 8 kilometres every second. So if you translate that into miles per hour, it's 17,500 miles per hour. That's so fast, so that as we fell towards the centre of the Earth, as we fell, the Earth's surface just curved away below us. So we ended up falling round the Earth. And that's why astronauts feel weightless. Not because gravity's gone, because gravity's there. Gravity is pulling us in towards the centre of the Earth, but we're falling around it and we feel weightless. And it is the most natural, relaxing feeling you can imagine. I forgot what it's like to have weight. I loved somersaults. Just being able to tumble slowly for as long as I wanted without stopping. It's just a magical feeling. And we can use this feeling of weightlessness, sometimes we call it microgravity, but we can use that for our experiments. Of course, was my job, was to do experiments in space. But it's not just work. There's all sorts of things astronauts have to do. We have to do exercise to keep healthy, of course. We can play games. But one of the things that we always loved to do at the end of a working day was that we would just, all together as a crew, gather round the biggest window we could find and look out. We could look out at, the most amazing views of the Earth. Absolutely fabulous. I remember seeing, you could see the difference between where the land meets the sea. The clouds were so bright because the sunlight was reflecting from the top of the clouds back up to us in space. I had to scrunch up my eyes to look at them for long. We would go all the way round the Earth in 90 minutes. In fact, knowing that, we can calculate how many times a day a space station goes all the way round the Earth. How many orbits does it make in 24 hours? So have you got your calculators? So I'm going to get mine. So if you haven't got a calculator, you can write it down, or if you really like mental arithmetic, you can do it in your head. So first of all, we need to work out the number of minutes in a day. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my calculator. So there are 24 hours in a day, aren't there? So 24 hours. In each hour, how many minutes? 60 minutes. So it's 24 times 60. That will give us the number of minutes in a day. That equals 1,440 minutes. Okay, now keep that number. So if there's that many minutes in a day, and it takes us 90 minutes to make one orbit of the Earth, how many orbits can we do in 1,440 minutes? Well, that's going to be 1,440 minutes divided by 90 minutes equals, what do you get? 16. So I orbited the Earth 16 times every day. There were 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets in every day for me on board the space station. Beautiful. Now, there's some questions from Francesca Joslin, who's a Year 6 student in Hampshire.
Hi Helen, my first question is, why do you think you were chosen over everyone else to go to space?
So if you're going to go into space, you need to have an understanding of science or engineering or medicine, and to really be able to communicate well. My mission was going to be all done in the Russian language, so I needed to understand some foreign languages as well and be physically fit. But I think what's really important is that ability to get on well with different people, and to be able to work in teams, to be able to communicate well with each other. And that was a big part of the selection process, how well we could work together with others.
My second question is, were you scared? And if you were, how did you get over it?
I think we are scared of the unknown the things we don't know much about. And my training was so good that really it taught me everything I needed to know. I understood what was happening. I knew what I had to do. So there was just no need to be scared. And I don't think any of us was scared at all during that mission. I always think now, if I'm a bit worried about something, if I'm anxious, I'll find out more about it. And then it really does help me to stop being quite so worried.
My last question is, what is your best memory on your space mission?
I think if I have to choose one thing, it would be my crew. We'd been living and working together in a very confined environment. We'd trusted each other with our lives, getting to the space station especially. And those people became really my best friends. It's such a wonderful relationship that astronauts have with their crew. And the hardest thing of my whole space mission was when I had to return to Earth and leave the space station, and I had to leave my crew to continue their mission in space. And saying goodbye to them was the hardest part of my mission. So brilliant questions, Francesca. And I'd just like to finish with a thought about some of the views outside the space station. Now, I didn't go out and do a spacewalk, but looking out the window. Now, I've talked a bit about the Earth already, but then when we looked the other way, out into space, at first I could just see blackness because my eyes were used to these very bright lights inside the space station. But then gradually, as I looked, my eyes got used to the darkness and the stars started to appear, and I could just see millions and billions of stars. I know that stars are being sucked into black holes, some are exploding in supernovae, new stars are being created. And I knew when I looked at those stars, not that I could see all of these explosions and things, but when I looked at the stars, I knew that I was there in space, having that wonderful view, because I had applied for a brand new opportunity that before I thought was impossible. So I think we all need to keep on being curious, keep on learning and discovering and trying out new things so we can understand what's around us, improve life, and have some amazing experiences.
Well, that was fantastic to hear from Helen Sharman. And I wonder how many of you are sat watching that are thinking, I want to be an astronaut. What do you think? Who amongst you is going to be one day going up into space? Well, it's time for me to say goodbye. I hope you get busy. I'm particularly going to be focusing my energies into significant people, and I think I might have a little look about civil rights activists, and I think I'm going to choose inventors too. So I'll get back to you with perhaps some of the work that I've done at the end of the week. Okay, take care, have a great week. We'll be in touch again soon. Bye.